Hey guys, and welcome to the channel. Right, Stefanos Tsitsipas versus Alexander Zverev post-match. Before we get into that, I will be giving spoilers, of course. So if you haven't watched the highlights or you want to watch the rerun, go and watch that now and click off this video. But if you're here for some analysis on this, then we're going to get right into it. Before we do, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't done so already. Thanks to those who are already supporting and following the channel. Really does help us out. We're on our road to 3K subs. Stefanos Tsitsipas gets it done in straight sets and very impressively as well. He will look to defend his Monte Carlo title tomorrow against none other than Alejandro David, who beat Dimitrov in a very entertaining contest earlier in the day against Grigor Dimitrov. Can I just say, in the quarterfinals, I did so well to get every single prediction right. Semi-finals got both wrong. I went for Zverev and I went for Dimitrov, and neither ended up being the case. So fair play to both players. I thought David, I'll very, very briefly touch upon that, played really, really well against Dimitrov, of course, his first ever Masters 1000 final, and he was pretty clutch at times. He was a break-up in that second set against Dimitrov, ended up losing it, but recovered well in the third set. For Tsitsipas, though, it was a masterclass, to be perfectly honest with you. It was a very intelligent display. It's not the best tennis I've ever seen him play, but it was, in terms of his tennis IQ, it was very, very high in this match. Zverev did look slightly weary, I think, after the Sinner match, although Tsitsipas also had a long match against Schwartzman yesterday, both playing three setters, and Tsitsipas actually playing, and playing later as well than Zverev, but didn't look as intense and as physical maybe. But either way, the tactics employed by Tsitsipas were exemplary. We'll go into that. We're also going to go into how not just the tactics that Tsitsipas employed, but how the match went as well. And for me as well, what Zverev missed, I think, today as well. There are a few bits that he'll look to improve on come the rest of the clay court swing. I think it was an underwhelming performance from his side, but I think he was also made to be in certain uncomfortable positions that normally he wouldn't be. So let's first of all start off with Alexander Zverev then, and then we'll go on to the victor in Stefanos Tsitsipas. Of course, we'll probably end up crossing over as we discuss each. I'm going to bring up the stats as well for the match. As you can see here, I'll quickly go over Tsitsipas winning a 6-4, 6-2, really impressive display from the Greek player. And it's great because for him, he didn't have a particularly good start to the year. I know he went to semi-finals in the Australian Open, and that was impressive. But since then, he hasn't done a whole lot. And I think he's kind of just drawn a line under that and said, okay, well, that's happened, but now I'm on my favorite surface. I'm on clay, and I cannot wait to play. And you can genuinely feel it. You can genuinely feel it. I think it's just going to be so good. I just cannot wait. I genuinely cannot wait to see the final, and also the rest of the clay court swing, because it really sets up nicely, I feel, with Tsitsipas coming into some good form for sure. But you can see here a really good serving day for Tsitsipas, 8 aces. For Zverev, 3 aces only and 4 double faults. I'm going to touch upon Zverev first. He made a lot of first serves, and you can see here 65% is pretty good. It's in the good range, I would say. Anything above 70% is exemplary for me. It's outstanding. 60% is good. 65%, very good. And he was at 65%. Now, for large periods of the match, his first serve percentage was actually above 70%. But as we've said on multiple videos, and as I think it rightly should be pointed out, first serve percentage is all well and good, but where the stats really show the story of someone's service games is the first serve and second serve points won. And you can see his Zverev just wasn't able to back it up. First serve points won 53% and second serve points won 35%. Not only was he not able to back it up, but in terms of his first serve placement, it wasn't particularly on point today. For Tsitsipas, it really was. He was hitting the corners. I think 90% of his serves were in that kind of outer box they show on TV, where he's not down the middle of the box, it's in corners. He was spot serving phenomenally, I thought, today, Tsitsipas on the first serve. For Zverev, who normally, let's be honest, does have a similar type of first serve. In fact, in a lot of people's books, maybe even a better first serve than Tsitsipas. For me, I class him as having a better first serve generally. On the clay, I think Tsitsipas is at least equal, and I think today obviously a better serving day. But Zverev will be disappointed not to hit his spots. I think there were a lot of serves which were a bit too central into the well, not even into the body, into the hitting zone really of Tsitsipas, and he was quite inventive on the returns. He didn't just hit drive, returns. I think partly because of how big Zverev serves, he sliced a lot and blocked a lot deep, and then said to Zverev, "Okay, what are you going to do?" And Zverev was too passive on the serve plus one shots. He really was, especially on the forehand side. Throughout the whole tournament, he's had great depth. That wasn't really the case in this match. The depth wasn't there to that degree. He'll be disappointed. The backhand on the line wasn't really firing as it has been as well. He predominantly went to the backhand of Tsitsipas because that is his weakness for sure. But I think overall he was confused by the tactics of Tsitsipas, who, tried to drag him into the net a lot with low slices, tried to drag him out on angles, just made him really uncomfortable throughout the whole match. And Zverev wasn't able to adapt. And I think that's really the story of the match, to be perfectly honest with you. It was a very interesting match, though, in terms of the serving. And you can see a 75% for Tsitsipas, 58% on second serve as well. For Zverev, 35%. Break points saved. So you can see not always, but large periods of being under pressure on serve, 3 out of 8. And for Tsitsipas, 2 out of 4. So break points saved, pretty impressive there. In terms of, I think, the tactics employed by Tsitsipas, I touched upon, of course, that he tried to drag Zverev even into the net. So he wanted to drag Zverev forward. Zverev, for some reason, was very, very, very far behind the baseline in a lot of the exchanges. I know Tsitsipas is big, especially on the forehand, and he's able to dictate for large periods, especially if he's hit a good first serve. But Zverev was way too deep behind the baseline. I'm not sure why he was that deep. And then what it opened up, and he didn't adapt as well, by the way, Zverev at all at any point, was the drop shot. Tsitsipas, I don't think he has a plus drop shot. I think he's probably got a B plus drop shot. So it's pretty damn good, but it's not phenomenal. He didn't have to hit many amazing drop shots though today, to be perfectly honest with you, because he would have Zverev 4 meters behind the baseline, drop shot, and it might even be close to the back end of the service box, and he'd win the point. Zverev, just as fit as he is, as quick as he is, as much of an athlete as he is, if you're having to cover that much distance, it's way, way too difficult. And at the ones that he did end up getting to, he didn't do enough with them. He either hit an approach shot, which was just airy, and Tsitsipas then would pick him off at the net. He'd either pass him straight away, or Zverev would hit a volley, and the first volley wasn't good enough, and then Tsitsipas would pass him. Or it would end up being Tsitsipas would come to the net himself and finish off the point and say, okay, right, I'm going to do it myself. He was just a lot more proactive. I think there's a lot more thought into the game from Tsitsipas. The low slices and the drop shots, bringing Zverev in. He was uncomfortable hitting shots at his ankles. He's a very, very tall player, of course. And I think he showed a little bit of a deficiency there. And that's something that players will look at, because on the clay, it's obviously a very useful tactic, pushing people back and hitting the drop shot. But that low slice is not something that a lot of people use on the clay for, as a general, I think, tactic, because it pops up a bit more on clay. People might start using that on hard courts against Zverev on the grass. So I think he needs to address that. I think also he needs to be more clinical at the net. I think at times during Monte Carlo, he was good at the net. He just seemed uncomfortable at the net throughout this whole match against Tsitsipas. It was, even the last point as well, he should have put it away, really came to the net and just looked uncomfortable. And Tsitsipas passed him. Some fantastic passing shots from Tsitsipas at times. Great angles found, great dexterity as well from the Greek player. And he just looked comfortable throughout the whole match. He served volleyed at times. And for him, it was, I'm almost going to put you in as many uncomfortable positions as possible and see if you can swim. And Zverev couldn't. Tsitsipas hit some fantastic forehands as well. And the forehand-to-forehand exchange, I did say that was a matchup that Tsitsipas would be relishing, and he did, because Zverev was just so cautious on the forehand as well. Throughout Monte Carlo, he's been pretty aggressive on both wings, and I felt like he went into his shell a little bit in the semi-final, probably because of the discomfort felt throughout as well because of the tactics employed by Tsitsipas. But a lot of cross court on the backhand, on the forehand as well. Very loopy, not really a lot on it. The depth wasn't there, and Tsitsipas just said, thank you, I'm going to make as many of these balls into forehands as I can. And when he had to hit a backhand, at times he could get away with hitting backhands deep enough into the court, but central, right? Central and deep, and Zverev would make a mistake, or he would passively then hit the ground stroke back down the middle of the court as well. So it was just underwhelming, I think, from Zverev. A very intelligent display of tennis from Tsitsipas, and dragging him out onto the forehand side, I think, is definitely something Zverev needs to work on as well. On the clay, of course, with the topspin, it being more conducive to topspin, you can use angles a lot more. And Tsitsipas uses this beautiful angle cross court on the forehand side, shorter, drags out your opponent almost off court. And Zverev doesn't like it. He doesn't like having to hit forehands at an angle, low at his feet. It's just not something that he is naturally, I guess, comfortable executing even. He's just naturally not comfortable executing that shot. It's a running forehand as well. He's just not particularly good at hitting it, especially when he's dragged off that much off the court. And even if he is able to hit it back in court, which he did a number of times, the court is just so wide open for Tsitsipas to then go down the line. So it was really, really intelligent, I thought, from Tsitsipas. The returning as well, managed to make a lot of returns. Yes, Zverev didn't serve particularly well, but I was impressed by Tsitsipas's returning. And also the fact that he was able to hit it deep, and he sliced a lot. I think 22% of the returns were slices. Previous rounds, it was 9%. So clearly knew that Zverev doesn't particularly like the slice return, maybe, especially if it's deeper. Because what does it mean? Let's be honest. What does it mean? It means Zverev has to generate his own pace. And sometimes when he's not playing the best tennis, he struggles with that, and he can play passively. And he did say, I don't want to push the ball back in court anymore in one of his post-match interviews in this tournament. He kind of was doing that today. And I think he'll be disappointed. I could see he was tired and weary, but the fight wasn't quite there. And that's something he needs to address. But a decent run for sure, making the semi-finals for Tsitsipas. He makes the final against David Fokina. And if he plays like that, I think it's very hard to say that he'll lose, to be perfectly honest with you. And I think he'll go back-to-back, honestly. But a really, really impressive display from the Greek player. Great to see him back in form, especially as well after, I think, surrendering the 5-2 lead against Schwartzman in the second set in the last match that he played. And then having to, of course, come back from 4-love down in the third set and then win 6 games in a row to win that match. This was a very clinical and polished performance. Great to see. He's clearly enjoying playing on the clay, and rightly so. He's got a good enough game, and almost as well, I have to say, masks some of the deficiencies in his backhand as well, which still needs work. But on the clay, he's got a lot more time, and it's a big swing. It's a one-hander, and he doesn't mind taking the ball high. So it is, I think, the perfect surface for him to bring the best out of his game, and we're seeing that, I think, for sure. That's all from me. I'll do a separate final preview. Thanks very much, guys, for tuning in. Please remember to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And, of course, do check us out on all podcast platforms. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all those good things. If you are also interested in football, we have a separate channel called QualityShot Football. Do subscribe to that. Check it out if you're interested in football content as well. Thanks very much, guys. Stay safe and well. I'll see you.